Hi, Misha here, and they don't make them like they used to is a very common opinion, very widespread belief, especially when it comes to Colts. And today, I want to put that to the test. And I just so happen to have two 2022 examples of these guns here. Two of my favorite Colts of all time. My LE6920 SOCOM, complete with the 14.5-inch barrel, and my AR15 A4 with the fixed stock and full 20-inch barrel. These have been great guns, and these are both pretty early examples. This one's from the first run, or at least the second run when they were still doing the roll marked lower, and this one is maybe from the third or fourth run, still early on. We've had a lot of luck with these over the years, and these were built at a time, although this is towards the very end, when Colt still had government contracts, and they've been very, very reliable at the range. We haven't had the A4 out in a little while, but over the years it's been out several times, and it's never let us down. AR15 A4. As for the 6920, well, we had this one out about a year ago at the cabin where we did a cabin porch video. And this too has never let us down. In fact, with some debate, I decided to keep this one, or one of these, instead of the FN USA M4 Collector's Edition. And years later, no regrets. It's a lot of fun. And the SOCOM again. I don't own Colts because I consider them the best of the best. I don't own Colts because I'm an elitist. I own Colts because growing up, if you wanted a dependable AR-15, Colt was the way to go. And that kind of carries on into adulthood. And I've never had trouble with them on the terms of cycling. But since I picked these two up, well, Colt lost a lot of government contract work, and eventually ended up being purchased by CZ, so things changed. The LE6920 turned into the CR6920, and we had lowers marked Carbine, even on the A4s, which obviously upset a lot of people. So with that, I thought it would be interesting to compare my guns with two fresh off the truck examples built October, November of 2022. Are they as good? Are they better? Or has quality control, parts, manufacturing, all that fallen off, as the internet would definitely indicate? Let's find out together, because I haven't really looked at them myself yet. Real quick before we open those boxes, my guns are pretty stock here, pretty standard. On my 6920 SOCOM, the biggest change I made was replacing the extended A2 birdcage with a Surefire. A friend gave me one years ago, and it seemed the right thing to do, especially considering with it on here it's over 16 inches. Here are the rail panels and foregrip it came with. This is the Maytech rear sight it came with. Of course, I put on a used aim point that came in the shop. The only other change I really made, I put on a B5 SOP mod stock. It came initially with the standard M4. As for my AR-15 A4, it might seem like I changed it, But really, I just accessorized it. I did nothing to the barrel. I changed nothing internally. Mine came with the right side selector. The buttstock is the same. I just added stuff to it. This pouch, a sling, and ACOG that I got at a good price. And I swapped out the carry handle that initially came with for a Maytag rear sight. And I swapped out the standard A2 style handguards for Knight's armament. And here's the Knight's grip, and then just a surefire light. And here is a laser designator that a friend gave me. So yeah. Oh, and of course the Harris bipod. So same gun, same barrel, all that. Just accessorized a bit because I was going for a pretty close M16 A4 clone, as like with the 6920 SOCOM, going for an M4 A1 block 1 or block 1.5 clone, but not going overboard, just kind of finding parts as I had time and money to pick them up. Frankly, it was a lot of fun. So with the newer guns, is it worth doing the same? Can people still have fun with those? Well, let's find out together. Let's dive in. Oh, and if you could, please do like, share, subscribe. You know how it goes. And if you'd like to help support the channel, check out the link to the Patreon page. Here's the box the A4 rifle comes in. Very standard Colt box that they've been using for at least a decade now. The gun itself has a chamber flag and comes in plastic. Nothing special. And it comes with the now standard Colt accessory pack. One Magpul mag. No cover on the top. Colt manual and cable lock. This is exactly what my A4 came with. The A4 rifle comes in the standard Colt box, something they've been using for at least a decade. It's got this clamshell inside. It comes wrapped in plastic. Has this chamber flag, which frankly is better than a lot. It's not a zip tie. And it comes with the standard Colt accessory pack. You get a slimline manual, one Magpul 30 round mag, no cover, cable lock, and it's actually sealed. This is exactly the box and accessories that my A4 came with 8 years ago, and that really they've always come with, so no changes there. Let's look at the gun itself. Here we go. And at first, identical. This is the same handguard mine came with originally. It does have a heat shield inside. Buttstock with storage compartment. And this is just about the only AR I can think of in 2022 that still comes with a removable carry handle. Once these things were everywhere, now they're actually becoming very hard to find. 20-inch standard profile A2 type barrel, adjustable front sight, all that jazz. But one major complaint. The earlier ones, like mine, for years were marked AR15 A4. But then, after CZ took over, they shipped a batch of A4s with carbine marked receivers. I am pleased to report this is back to not only being marked AR15 A4, but it's back to having the CAR prefixed serial and not the CR. Not that it's a big deal, but maybe they listened, or maybe the first ones were just a mistake. I don't know. Now, this is a roll marked lower. This is laser etched, laser engraved. Look, this is just new technology. This is what so many factories are going to, and it's actually even government specification in the USA and in European nations. It's just the way things are. Accept it or not, I don't think it's something that should ding the gun. let's flip them over. The new Colt A4 does have the ambi safety, and it is even marked safe and fire on the right side. It does have the newer style cage code up here. The cage code is just another government thing. For years, the U.S. government used C for Colt, and every factory kind of had their own letter, number, combo, or sometimes just letter. But I guess with so many new subcontractors in the digital age, they started assigning strings, cage codes. So it's on the upper here, at least on this one. The older one here has a different forge code. Just how it is. That's fine. It's absolutely fine. Handguards. And something else, the barrel marking. This has the traditional old school MPC 5.56 1 7 twist barrel. And it is slimmer under the handguards standard. Stock feels very similar. I can't say they're from the same batch, or for that matter, the handguards. That's kind of above my pay grade, but they look the same. There is one difference, though, with the lowers. Have you noticed it? And this might be considered a positive for the new guns for some people. Literally since the beginning of their semi-automatic civilian line, 1964, for whatever reason, on their semi-auto lowers, Colt machined off the selector stops. I have a 1965 SP1 machined off there, so this isn't something they did later. And that carried over to the modern era. The only Colt I can think of that did not have them machined off was actually the reissue, the retro series with the A1 lowers, and that's because those were actually subcontracted out to another company. With the newer gun here, we have full stops. Trying to get my cord out of the way. Does this mean this lower is subcontracted out to someone else? I don't know. Or maybe Colt just stopped doing that. Maybe CZ said, "Why the hell are you doing this?" And the response was, "Oh, been doing it for over 50 years." And they said, "Well, stop it." I don't know. I know that some earlier this year had the stops, but they were still marked carbine. But now for the first time, we actually have proper A4 and intact stops. That might be something that appeals to collectors. So with those stops intact, I had a question about something internal. With that change to the lower, does it retain the little web in the back that would not allow for any full auto or lightning link type stuff to be installed? Something Colt has done for a very long time. First they pinned in blocks, and later they simply left a piece not machined. And it's still there. Legally, it's not required, but Colt likes doing it. So that kind of makes me think that this might still be a lower made at the Colt factory, because I don't know why a third party would do it. Again, those retro reissue guns did not have that web or block in the back. The SP1s did not, but they had the larger .320 front pin with the screw, and later guns had the larger trigger pins. This has standard trigger pins, standard .250 front, so just as a little extra insurance against tampering, it has that. It does still have a uncut bolt carrier, and it still has Colt's patented greasy grease, which has a very unique and, to me, very pleasant smell. Standard lower sling swivel, standard bayonet lug for an M7 or M9 or other. Of course, swing swivel back here. Removable A2 bird cage on 1/2x28. And of course it accepts standard mags because this is the AR-15. So there we have it. What do you think? More importantly, let's move on to the one that you're probably more interested in. The 6920 SOCOM. The SOCOM comes in the same style of box, just different end label. And again, it's looking very, very close to what mine did when I first picked it up. It does come with a different accessory kit. We have a metal mag. Only one, but it's there. We have an additional rail cover in here, and we have the Knight's Armament foregrip, the broom handle. I like them, they're simple. And then we have the manual. So, yeah, not just the mag pull and manual. I'll be honest, I wasn't sure if we'd get that. I wasn't even sure what handguard we would really get. But this does seem to be a true Knight's Armament handguard with all 4 rail covers. And this is the correct barrel. I did pull the lower off. It does have the wrench flats under the handguard, and it is fatter under here. Goes out here. We have the M203 cut, and we have that extended A2 type flash hider that is factory pinned and welded under it. Thankfully, are still 1/2x28 threads. So if you want to SBR, you can. Or if you want to swap it out and repin something else like I did, you can do that too. The barrel has proper markings. It has the 13629 cage code on it, which is fine. That's government. It does actually have the reversible M4 sling mount. I've always thought those are cool. Your standard 6920s have it just on the bottom. Standard bayonet lug, and since we have the correct 14.5-inch barrel, again, permanently pin and welded out to 16, so this is not an SBR. This is not class 3. It actually fits a bayonet properly. Carbine length gas. Like I said, it is a little heavier. And then yet again, we have a nice surprise when it comes to the lower markings. This is not marked just carbine. We have M4A1, even U.S. property, and we have a CR prefixed serial. But to be fair, Colt has used CR prefixes for a long time, usually as replacement or spare solo lowers. Although I think, newer ones would be either standing for Colt's rifle or maybe civilian rifle. I don't know. It's a Colt thing. And again, we have selector stops. Unlike the earlier ones, like mine. Although mine has the row marks again. This is laser engraved. Standard A2 grip. I was also curious to see if they still have the Maytech rear sight. This is a true military grade backup sight. They do. Standard M4 stock with 2 attachment points, either up top or down below for a sling. Mine originally had it, but I put the SOP mod on. Something interesting. Most guns you get today have a 6-position receiver extension. Colt is still using a 4, which is, to be fair, mil-spec. Why 4 instead of 6, you might ask? Well, I would say 4 is better than 2, and 2 is what they used for years on the XM177 and all those. We do have a staked key to keep our extension on. And inside we have an H2 heavy buffer. And of course, M4 feed ramps in both. Flipping them both over. The other side, again, this block can easily be reversed by driving out a pin. Flip it over to the other side. Handguard. Standard port door. Standard deflector. Standard forward assist. Yep, they still use those. It does have safe and fire on the right side. That's good. One thing about this one, and I just randomly took one out of the box, it does not have the cage code. It does have the key for the forging, but there's no 13629 here. Mine does have it right there, and it's very likely another one I pulled out may have it, and that does kind of show us what we're at today. Things like that, cage codes, may or may not appear on uppers. Same goes for the bolt group. People really want that C on their bolt group. That's okay, but for current and for the last decade, really government spec, not so much the C. You want to see that cage code. I did look inside. It does have the full auto bolt group, and it does have the web in the lower. Pretty standard stuff there. And there is a proof marking on the hammer inside, and it is a semi-auto hammer with the little notch done. Stock it's normal, typical finish. Yeah, not a nickel's worth of difference aside from not having that cage code, and that did surprise me a little bit. I wasn't sure if they'd be able to source the external components like the handguard and rear sight. And it's interesting that they are still marked US properly with the correct mil-spec length barrel. So what do you think? Colt did not initially design, develop, invent the AR-15. Of course, that was done at Armalite based on the AR-10, and Eugene Stoner and Melvin Johnson. I want to give him credit because I actually really admire him. George Sullivan and others. Now, Colt purchased it and would introduce it and really take it where it needed to go. Armalite was an idea company. Colt was a manufacturer and a good marketer, and Eugene Stoner went to work for them. For decades, they developed any of the new ARs types that the government used. Now, of course, FN would come in, Hydromatic, GM, making them, but Colt was the idea person. And what we have here are representations of pretty much the last issue Colts to go. The M16 A4 was adopted in 1998 by the U.S. Marines. It's the Colt Model 901 or 905, depending on the fire mode. And was basically an M16 A2 with carry handle. And the A4 is basically the same gun in civilian form. Now, there are some differences. For example, the M4 feed ramps. That bugs some people. Doesn't really bug me. I know why they did it. So they can use the same upper forging and barrel extensions for all their guns. Because non-M4 ramps are just really not needed for anything else. So why have a whole different supply chain? And this is be the last really fixed buttstock gun. Now, of course, there are specialty guns like the Mark 12. Likewise, the SOCOM version here is based a civilian version of the Model 921HB. The original M4 was the Model 920 HB heavy barrel. The 920 would have been 3-round burst. 21 would have been auto, semi-auto. And these would go through the block 1, 1.5, 2, so on and so forth. And of course, these are still very much current issue, although the government's been mostly buying from FN for quite a long time. But there's plenty of Colts still knocking about too. And there are some specialist guns like the Mark 18. But this is a standard issue gun. And really is the AR15 Carbine perfected. And when these came out, it was so cool because it was the first time Colt really did a pin-and-welded barrel. The U.S. property and the M4A1 marking, That's just gravy. So those are some reasons I like the AR15 A4 and 6920 SOCOM. The history and just how close to military they really are. But that's far from it. These are also very good guns in terms of shooters. Colts have a military-style anodized finish with steel parts being phosphated. It is built to be rust-resistant. It's not built to be attractive. In fact, Colts are a little rough on the outside. And they don't have the tightest upper to lower fit. There can be play in a Colt. And their triggers are military triggers, to say the least. But there's a certain smoothness to how a Colt shoots. You heard me talking about the sploing. Well, that's just it, but that was just me kind of joking. Some rifles are actually truly annoying that do that, even vibrating your ear pro. These are just such smooth shooting guns. I think part of it is they're actually not at all overgassed. A lot of your commercial guns have a wider gas port to make sure they can cycle any type of ammo. Colts, at least up to the present day, have a port spec'd out for 5.56 62 grain NATO ammunition. And it shows. That said, I've been able to run Wolf and Bear in this. I don't use Tula, personal choice, but I've never had trouble with that either. So I've had no problems with steel case. But they do shoot so nice, and they feel good. And you can always upgrade the triggers. And it's something that you can't explain over a video. You really can't even feel it in a store dry firing. They just have a certain longevity. When you pick up a Colt, at least in the past, an SP1, a green label, you just felt like this gun's going to stick around for a long time. And I can't say that with other ARs, at least some of your budget ones like, say, Olympic. They just felt kind of chintzy. But I'm talking, of course, about older 6920s and even older A4s. This video is really focusing on the new ones as of late 2022. I'm happy, and if I'm being completely honest with you, a little surprised that I can report they feel the same. The upper to lower fit, the charging, of course I haven't shot them, but just the way the guns feel, it's the same. The finish, the same. The grease on them, the same. The accessories in the box, the same. Same. Is CZ turning over a new leaf with them after maybe stumbling just a little bit out of the gate? I don't know. Are these still built from full mil-spec parts that have been fully tested, fully vetted? I don't know. And it's difficult for anyone who doesn't work at the factory to know that. And they're pretty tight-lipped. What I can tell you is my A4 and my M4A1 have been very reliable over a number of years. And based on initial impressions of these guns, I would expect the same performance level, frankly. AR15 A4. Over the years through the store, I've sold a number of these. Why does someone want the A4? Well, it's longer, it's heavier, it's not really that much more accurate. Well, it is a little more reliable because of the rifle length gas, and because of that weight, there's no felt recoil at all. And for a civilian, the weight and length is not so important, and you have more real estate on the handguard. But really what I heard most from people buying these, especially when they came out 2014, 2015, 2016, it was different. People were kind of carbined out. They just wanted something, and it's a Colt. And in a lot of ways, this is the first military-style, military-spec rifle Colt has done since the last SP1s. Think about it. Most of their other guns in the late 80s were more of the H-bar style. And then in the 90s, of course, we had the assault weapons ban. They started removing bayonet lugs. And even after the ban came off in 2004, for a decade, they just did carbines. And when they did rifles, they were the match target, the MT style. In fact, they really never did do a true M16A2 clone in semi-auto. You kind of have to pick your battles there. You maybe settle for a heavy barrel or a large pin lower or something like that. And I think that would hold true today for the new AR15 A4s under CZ. Would I call these a collectible gun? Well, I would say Colts hold their value. Well, people know the name. But people generally do buy these for shooters or home defense or maybe farm guns. These are meant to be worked. As I've said for years, a Colt is not a show pony. It's a warhorse. It's a workhorse. And based on handling this, it's so hard to say. I mean, parts fail on anything. But I do still want to trust Colt, and I do trust CZ. And the fact that they changed the markings on the lower to make people happy, and they're still including a carry handle, I get this sense they're still trying. Which is more than I can say for some other brands. Colt 6920 SOCOM. I believe the next HK mag's reliable. So that's the rifle. Why this SOCOM carbine? Most of your 6920s have an extended 16.1 inch barrel with a removable muzzle device. Really, that's practical. You get a little more barrel length and you can screw things on. So why would you want to go to a fixed on device and a shorter barrel? Well, part of it is just the military spec. Another part is this is just kind of the proper tuned length. And you can mount a bayonet, again, kind of being mil spec. And I do like that the barrel is threaded under here. You have options. These do appear to be leftover contract military barrels. If you look at the FN M4 Collector series, they actually do a 14.7 inch barrel with a pinned on standard A2. It does have the 203 step here, but under the handguards, while it is heavy, it does not have the wrench flats. My point is the FN collector's guns have civilian barrels in them, even if they're high quality because they're FN barrels. So that's one reason I actually ended up keeping a Colt. Another was the U.S. property and the fact that they're marked M4A1 and the FNs are not. It is nice that you have the proper H2 buffer and you get a military grade backup sight. And the ambi, it's not a bad thing. I mostly sold these to people who are collectors like myself, or people who served over in Afghanistan and Iraq who wanted something as close to what they were issued as possible while still being a Class 1, Title I civilian gun. That lets me know they must have liked their gun pretty good if they're willing to spend their own money to buy a civilian version of it here. And that's really the only difference to note, at least originally, was the lower. It seems like the uppers, at least originally, were just contract uppers with a pinned on muzzle device put on a civilian semi-auto lower, but with replica markings. So let's end by talking cost. Ooh. To hear some people tell it, Colts are gold plated. And there definitely have been times when A4s were selling for $2,000 and up. And times that these SOCOMs were bringing, I kid you not, $4,000 on Gunbroker. But that's the aftermarket, the secondary market. Colt, even most dealers, they're not responsible for what some people get in their heads and want to pay. A good example is the Polish Archer, which is the Beryl brought over by IO. Originally, they were as cheap as $1,000, even less. But once they disappeared, people were paying $3,000 up. Of course, now we have the Arms of America Atlantic ones. The same thing happened with Colt. These came out, and then they disappeared, and now they're back. Now, the A4s have kind of come and gone more often, but they've always been a little bit limited. The SOCOMs here, at least this spec, well, I'm really happy they brought it back and they didn't bungle it. I really am, because people love these, and I know a lot of people that missed out and were almost tempted to pay crazy prices. Now they don't have to. So what's the real value of these Colts? When the A4 came out, it was about $1,000 to $1,100 gun, brand new. A little bit more than a standard rifle, but considering even back in 2014 there just weren't that many rifles from other manufacturers on the market, you didn't have a lot of options, and you did get the carry handle, which was, selling for $100 at least. Today, they have gone up a little bit, because what hasn't post 2022? They're not bad though. They're about 1,200 to 1,300 bones. Still a little bit more than maybe a Smith & Wesson, but really, guys, that's middle of the road. Plenty of brands are a lot more spendy than these. A lot more. I think if you want a rifle, you'd be hard-pressed to source all these correct parts, namely the stock, the carry handle, and the barrel, for a lot less. And now that these are properly marked lowers, I'd say go for it if you want an A2, A4 type gun. As for the SOCOM, when these came out, they were around $1,400, and some people balked at that. Even back then, I wasn't sure why. I think it's just they weren't interested. That's fine, but I think if you were to do this again yourself, look what Colt 14.5-inch barrels go for, than to have a professional pin and weld job. And then a Knight's Armament quad rail, not inexpensive. A Maytech rear sight, again, not inexpensive. Heck, even these ambi safeties sell for a good bit. And that's before you account for the Colt lower with the desirable markings. Collectors be crazy, but there you go. No, I thought if you were wanting an M4A1 Block 1 or Block 1.5 clone, these needed very little work out of the box to get them exactly where they needed to be. So they were a good deal. Today, the price actually hasn't gone up much at all. Around $1,500, maybe $1,600, although some people recently reported even a little cheaper on a Black Friday sale. And keep in mind too, for whatever it's worth, they do come with a metal Colt magazine. I know that's kind of silly to brag about, but I mean, the accessory kits alone sell for $60, $70. No, I still think these are a good buy. If I didn't have this one, I'd keep one of these. Maybe I'd look for one that actually had the cage code upper. But since this A4 does, I bet that's findable. Again, I randomly pulled one out of the box each. Didn't try to cherry pick, because I wanted to give you a sincere first impression. So what do you think? What brand would you prefer? What do you think about pricing? I know there's a ton of AR makers on the market today, and there's been a lot of ups and downs with Colt over the last couple of years, and I'm not going to excuse some of the things they've done. I'm just trying to judge these firearms on what they are, their own merit, and not have the baggage of the company they're from. I know some don't want to do that, maybe can't even do that. I try to, and usually I'm pretty successful unless it's just something egregious. Luckily, Colt hasn't done anything that horrible to my mind that it taints them for me, because for almost my entire life, I've liked Colt ARs. Like I said, a Colt SP1 was the first .223 I ever shot in my life, and I was very young. So let's try out this Surefire flash hider here at dusk with the Colt SOCOM. There we have it.
It was pretty flash hidey. There really wasn't a whole lot out of it.
I can say that I didn't see any flash.
Valid.
At the end of the day, what am I saying? What are my conclusions? I'm not saying run out and buy a Colt because it's the best AR-15. Honestly, Colt has kind of stood pretty still. The A4 is late 90s tech. The M4A1 is late 2000s tech, maybe early 2010s. That's not a bad thing. I mean, I collect CNR guns, so yeah. But a lot of other AR makers have kind of come and gone and really advanced the whole field. LMT comes to mind. FN makes a beautiful gun. What I would say, if you've always wanted a Colt, for whatever reason, this is the first time in at least a couple of years that a gun that comes in a Colt box feels like a Colt and has proper markings like a Colt. So if you're wanting one, especially this SOCOM, I'd probably look for one now because who's to say how long it'll last. I'm not even sure if the next batch of A4s will have AR15 A4 on the lower. For all I know, they're just using up old stock. I don't know. Colt's future has always been iffy, even with the CZ in the game now. I don't know. Still wouldn't necessarily trust them 100%. But no, these do actually feel like Colts. And I, first impressions, would trust them to run as well as my other ones. That's just me, though. Has anyone actually experienced failures, breakages, at least anything abnormal with the newer Colt? Say one in the last 2 or 3 years? Very curious. What do you think? Let's have a nice discussion below. And, share our favorite ARs and maybe some AR horror stories when we're at it, too. We've just done a lot of AK videos lately, so with these coming in and it being a rainy day outside, I thought, why not? You know I like doing Colt videos. You know the drill by now. If you could, please do like, share, subscribe, and if you'd like to help support the channel, please check out the link to the Patreon page. This is Misha, and I'm sure I'll be seeing Fox soon next time, so we will both catch you then.